Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast, web series, whatever. And I'm here today with James. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, I am James. Hi, I'm James Tucker. I am a printmaker, poet, and all-around fan of the arts, and a fan of Katie, and recent recent mover from San Francisco into a bucolic lifestyle to fulfill my passion to work with trees and print and sculpture.
James is my mentor and taught me basically everything I know about printmaking and design and life. And I got to work at the Aesthetic Union, which is James's child, last summer as a printer's devil or printing assistant. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the founding and James arc of the Aesthetic Union.
Yeah, sure. So I founded the Aesthetic Union in 2013 as a letterpress shop, gallery, and retail store, stationery store in San Francisco. And kind of that long journey, and I'm sure we'll get into it, of why I wanted it to look the way it does and stuff like that is, you know, I I started as a designer, um, kind of like Katie, and I went to design college after going to design vocational school, and I quickly realized that I just didn't like being on a computer the whole time. And this was 2003, so I feel like um, the crossover we see now with design and handwork wasn't really there. It was mostly just computer,
Mm.
um, which was just not my vibe. I grew up using my hands a lot. I love hand drawing like a lot of artists, and I found my way in into the sculpture studio, and I realized that I probably wasn't going to be doing sculpture after college, and thinking about how I could make a living as an artist afterwards. So I found printmaking, which was like a good intersection between sculpture and design. And I found screen printing, and I was doing like screen printing band posters. And this was like in the day when Jason Munn, who's a great designer, still a great designer, he was doing a lot of screen printed band posters. So I really like admired his work. And I was just making band posters with my friends. And then I saw a pamphlet for a print show or print catalog from Hat Show Print, which is a historic letterpress shop in Nashville. And I said, wow, what's this? What kind of Photoshop filter was being used on this type for this treatment? Because it's all distressed and cool. My friends was like, that's not a Photoshop filter. That's actually how it looks. And we have a letterpress department at Micah. You should check it out. So I checked it out and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I really fell in love with the presses and the history, everything like that. I quickly emailed Hat Show Print to see if they did internships over the summer, and they did. So I did an internship. I think it was in 2005 or six over the summer, and met some incredible letterpress printers, including Brad Vetter, who's still doing a lot of letterpress printing in Louisville, Kentucky, and he showed me everything that he could teach me. Jim Shredden was there also, the kind of master printer of Hat Show Print. And after that, I was hooked. I really wanted to start my own letterpress shop. I was graduating school from Baltimore, and Baltimore was a great historic city with like a lot of potential. And I always thought it would be cool to activate the community more with printmaking,
Hmm.
since printmaking has a huge history of activism and it's kind of like the people's art. It's how to get your word out. Um, but I didn't know if I wanted to be in Baltimore anymore. So San Francisco was a great place. There was actually a lot of print shops, and I knew I needed to work a little bit more and save up more money to start my own shop. So San Francisco, there was a lot of print shops. So I applied to every print shop there was, and I heard back from one saying that they didn't need an employee, but they could use the help. So I interned for free over the summer. I landed there, slept on a friend's couch. I found a job at a book bindery, old school book bindery, which actually was 2 blocks away from the Aesthetic Union. And so I just worked. I worked as a letterpress printer after finding a job as one eventually, as printing wedding invitations and greeting cards, and just kind of like learned the whole business, ups and downs of business. I never went to business school, so I just kind of paid attention. And I started posting jobs I was doing after hours because that was one of the things I could do at the shop was just print my friends' business cards. And we weren't really printing business cards at the wedding invitation shop. So I started this blog called the Aesthetic Union, which was really, um, as the name suggests, a union between the person I was making stuff with, the client, and then also the design and printer, which was me. So it just grew from there. It started as a Tumblr and then eventually on Instagram about 2 years after Instagram came out, which was cool. Hop on those trends. You never know what's going to happen. And so I started that, and I saved a lot of money, just being frugal. Not like I made a lot of money, but I just didn't go out that much. And the owners of Heath Ceramics, which is a historic ceramic studio in Sausalito, was starting a tile factory in San Francisco. And they said, "Hey, we're trying to create this community of artists and community of makers. We really like your Instagram and what you say about art and design and the kind of intersection between art, craft, and design. It's really within our ethos. Would you be interested in starting a shop?" And I said, "Well, I was about 3 or 4 months in, getting laid off from the wedding invitation shop. I said, well, I'm not doing anything else, so I guess I'll do this."
Oh my God. Crazy.
In 2000, yeah, 2013, I just started the shop, not knowing what I was doing, but it just kind of slowly built upon there. I started it with $20,000 and just dragged furniture from the street to be part of the retail. Had shows with friends, made prints, and kind of split percentages for shows, and survived enough to just keep doing it for 10 years, which was cool. And it always evolved here and there, but it was what really inspired me from the shop being kind of a public facing shop, compared to a lot of print shops I've seen, which was like in basements with cranky printers, was Hat Show Print, which always was like a public facing shop. When I worked there, it was on Broadway, not in the museum, the Country Music Museum as it is now, but it was a place where people could come in, interact with the printers, buy their favorite Johnny Cash, Elvis poster, Loretta Lynn, whatever we printed, and they could see it being made. I saw the magic in people's eyes. And I want to bring it to them. I think I've always been a fan of living history museums too. I grew up next to one,
Oh, wow.
like a farmhouse. So I always thought it was my calling to dress up like Ben Franklin and print stuff for people. But I don't know. I just sometimes
And
I
you did
find those
it.
people annoying. So yeah, I did it my way. I did it my way, and that's what counts. Yeah.
So I'm very curious, your kind of approach to art. Well, you have personal artwork that you make, and it's very intertwined with your sort of interest in community building, labor, history, all these sort of like other more social elements. And I was wondering if you could talk about your side, sort of like design philosophy or life philosophy about those sorts of things. I know it's like a huge broad question, but take it sort of however you want.
Could you just repeat that first part you cut out? And I'm in the middle of the woods. So I have so let me see. I have my own artwork,
Yes.
which is abstract, landscapey kind of, you know.
Yeah.
And then I have the politically charged shit
Sort of.
starter artwork. Is
Well,
that what you're asking?
well, yeah, that, and I think one of the general questions that a lot of designers face, especially younger designers, is like you're starting out, you have to figure out whether you want to be more like an artist making like your own particular work, or whether you go like join a design firm and make commercial work and then live that kind of
Hmm.
life. And you've sort of, through your many incarnations, have figured out how to kind of do everything. And I was wondering sort of how you've come to the kind of balance you've struck for yourself. Because I think a lot of people think of you as like an artist, like an individual artist. But also you have like this history of like commercial design for different communities and groups and companies in San Francisco.
Hmm.
Just wondering your sort of thoughts on that. And you can also talk about the political stuff because I think that's probably the most interesting.
Yeah. I it's I don't know. It depends on how much you like working under other people's direction, and it depends on what your tolerance is for bullshit. I mean, I guess you have to have a tolerance for bullshit either way.
Yeah.
Maybe more in the fine art world. Um, Maybe much more. At least when you're working for someone else, you can clock out
Mhm.
and not, you don't have to take home your work. As a fine artist, you're always on,
Yeah.
you know? And if you stop, the thing with being a fine artist, and I don't know if I'm getting to your question, the thing with being a fine artist is you always have to be spinning that wheel. You
Yeah.
always have to be on top of something. You always have to be reaching out, sending emails, unless, and you're lost, right? Because there's someone behind you wanting to take your place. It's a very like rat racy cutthroat thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think they tell you about that at all in art school. They're just like, make some oil paintings. You'll be in a museum. Fuck that. That's not how fine art works. Um, and there is, yes, post and marketing and all this other stuff. I know a lot of fine artists, and I'm looking at their careers from an outside perspective, so I can only give my perspective. But if you're not really pushing your own work, or you're working with a gallery pushing your work, you'll be left behind and you have to start over. And
Yeah.
that's what it is. Um, you get to do your own thing, which is cool, but you also become your own boss. So it's not like you can do whatever you want at any point of the day. Whenever I worked for myself, and the reason why I started a shop, because I needed a schedule to be productive. And I
Yeah.
still have a schedule written on my wall even now, and I don't have, a boss or a shop. Um, and it's hard for me to talk about working in a design firm because I've never worked in a design firm, but I could say what it is to work as a printer printing shitty wedding invitations, or, um, you
Or good
know,
ones later.
or good ones later, which the shop did eventually do, but the aesthetic union actually did. But um, I can tell you what it is to be a manager of people and to kind of do that. And it's I think working under someone, under a manager, is it depends on who the manager is, but being a good manager, you're doing so much more work than everything because you're just trying to hold everything together. I think working as kind of a gear in a large design firm, um, or a printer in a large design firm, it just depends on what you want to do. You can
Yeah.
just clock out at the end of the day, which I always envied the people that were able to just do what they want to do, take bullshit, and then you just kind of leave it on the step as you leave. Um,
Yeah.
but
'Cause your ethos is
yeah,
so like your personality was like so very much tied with the shop. Like it's like I can't imagine you ever being able to clock out like ever, given like your interests, your political interests, your artistic interests, like um and maybe that's, I don't know, like it seems like when you start something like the Aesthetic Union or the free art and design school that I'm starting, like it's become sort of like inextricable, which is interesting now that you've given sold the shop, but like you are still a part of it. And I'm wondering if that's personally affected you at all. I guess it hasn't been that long, but you could talk about that.
I mean, no, you're you're right. Like when if you're going to start something like that and you're going to like brand yourself and you're going to be in the public eye, you have to be ready for being always in the public eye.
Yeah.
So, I remember um it's flattering the first couple of times to go to the movies and like have someone be like, "Hey, James, you said again." I'm like, I don't know who the fuck that person is. Um, but also, so that's kind of the good side in a way where it's like massaging your ego a little bit. But then in the bad side is like, God, can you imagine if you got into a fight like on the street with someone, or like you did something wrong, or like you, I don't know, I don't drop candy wrappers on the street, but if you drop the candy wrapper on the street and someone's like, "Hey, these stick unit, pick it up." What a hypocrite. So you're like always in that spotlight. And so that's a weird thing as well.
For sure.
Um, you know, how it affects me now, um, it's cool because I have all these relationships that I started in when I had the shop, but I don't have to answer to anyone really.
Yeah.
Like there's no there's no social investment in it that's tied to me making money, it feels like, which is great. Um, yeah, I think that's interesting. The other interesting thing too is like being politically minded like I was in the shop and I still am. It's just, you have a soapbox. So I always
Yeah.
thought that soapbox was great to give other people who don't have it. Um, sadly I've gotten death threats.
Yeah.
I got people I think standing outside of my house and watching me. Like I've gotten the phone calls like that,
Yeah.
especially for my like anti-gun violence and stuff like that stuff. There's some real fucked up people out there. And if you put yourself out there and it's your face, like be ready for some of that. And you have to kind of put your armor on and take it what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's scary because like the shop has the address on it. Like it's a publicly facing shop that anyone can walk into. And that's like
Yeah.
scary. Like when I was there last week, there was like an active shooter 2 blocks away. And it's like we're open to the public. There's nothing we can do other than close early and hunker down. Um,
Yeah.
it's
And
scary.
is it worth it too?
Right.
I mean, that goes back to the ethos of the shop, right? Like have it open for people to come in. Yeah, we can hide in basements and do our work and then just put it out there in the world. But like having that door open for people, I think is really important, even if there are death threats or active shooters or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, it's the world we live in. Um, but
Well,
I thought about it too, like especially during uh, the Trump era and when those people were empowered. Um, I was like, if I'm in the shop and someone comes in and shoots me because of a poster I printed, hell yeah, I'm doing something right.
yeah.
You know?
That's
Well,
hard.
I mean, like I don't have a suicide pact with it, but I'm
Right.
like, at least I died in my boots standing by the press
Yeah.
making political work. Like how fucking awesome is that? To me, I mean,
He
and I
died doing
think,
what he loved, causing
I
trouble.
mean, maybe I'm like you. I think I don't know. I picture you thinking about death a lot, but I think I and just like my death, and I think about like, oh, I could be old and I could die in the hospital. I certainly don't want that. I think about dying a good death, and dying a good death would be like dying with my boots on at the press, making a political poster, and
Well,
someone just hates what I'm doing.
I wanted to talk about that specifically because when I started grad school, one of the first articles I read about poster making was about the protest, the oh god, was the 60s or 70s in Paris, the student protests, and they had a lot of like screen printed posters, and not only were they like really politically activated, but they were beautiful. They were like so
Mm-hmm.
like the illustration typography was just incredibly powerful, and that was part of the message was how like beautiful DIY scrappy they were. And then when I started working at the Aesthetic Union, I know we have a couple posters like that in the back that are just like hung on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then thinking about like the protests in Iran, like last year, this year, like
Mm-hmm.
seeing a bunch of protest posters like that in Paris when I was visiting this year was really powerful to think about being part of this like over 100-year long kind of lineage of using um, posters and broadsides as, you know, political messaging. And I was wondering if you could talk about that, because I think that's one of the sort of unique things about letterpress and screen printing and kind of forward facing poster design.
Yeah, I think, I think making something beautiful that actually says something that meaningful is always going to be more effective than making something that is ugly that says something.
Yeah.
There is a place for kind of like anti-aesthetics, right? And
The
um
anti-aesthetic
and
union.
there's
Oh my God.
yeah, the anti that's what that's what I'm starting. And thinking about those things, like what, like people are drawn to a um whatever's whatever's hot right now in terms of like the trending look of things. I just gave a talk about beauty last night, and like the subjective and objective reality of beauty. And
Mhm.
like prior to the 18th century, there is actually a much more subjective view of what what beautiful things are, which was like a sense of order and symmetry and stuff that we see in the kind of like golden rectangle and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's arguably um kind of like we can say the same thing. It's like, yes, like stuff with symmetry is very settling for, at least for my brain.
Yeah.
I think it's settling for our brains. I mean, there's a reason why we make houses a certain way. And then after the 18th century, and then especially into modernism and postmodernism, which were like embracing the anti-aesthetic, or we're thinking about like how things could be like um, playing with asymmetrical objects. Um, I think even with that, there is this sense of what's going to look good or what's going to fulfill the um, the message we want to say, right? There's a graphic arts were called communication arts at one time, and I think that's still like a really valid name, because we are trying to communicate something, and how do we do it effectively? And if beauty um, goes along with that, then let's do it. And something beautiful can be like the keep abortion legal blue circle with the kind of type that fills that in. That's a beautiful design, very historic. Or we could look at Karita Kent's work, screen printed, big swaths of color, beautiful, beautiful messages, um, and or we can look at something like Susan O'Malley, who was a San Francisco artist, who's just doing typography, sans serif typography on a split pen background, which I always loved. And it's such a ubiquitous, like she doesn't own that style. It's like a letterpress style, like
Yeah.
Colby posters in
Right.
LA. But like that simplicity and that kind of feeling of what you get when you see those messages um, is ties in beauty with with the medium.
Yeah. And I think it's powerful. Like so many of my friends, because through me and through following the Aesthetic Union Instagram, like have come into the shop and bought posters, and they're like on their walls by their desk, by their office, like things that people look at every day that give them inspiration. And even the ones that aren't like political posters, the ones that are just like small messages. Like the fact that you could make someone's day like slightly better or improve their mood or their mental health through a piece of artwork is pretty life changing. And I
Mm-hmm.
imagine over the last decade, you've probably put work in like, I don't know, 10,000 people's homes. Like, who knows? I don't know that we could quantify that, but
That's a that's a scary thought, but
but it's
yeah,
good
I think
stuff. It's not bad stuff.
No, it's good. It's good, and it's like, so I think it's good. I think it's also like, and that's something that's really interesting too, because I always think about the things I think about always the bad stuff people say to me, and you rarely hear about the good stuff, you know? Or it's like reading the comments on a social media post. Um, the loudest people are going to be the smallest percentage.
Right.
And it's a good reminder, yeah, that so many people have seen the messages of the shop, whether it's political posters or the community prints, which were really just supposed to be like cheap window posters for people to put in their windows during COVID. Um, and How many people have walked past those things, or how many people have like artwork of mine um, in their house, and the artwork is really interesting because I started to incorporate my poetry in the abstract landscape prints I was doing, um, but a lot of that artwork originally didn't have words,
Yeah.
but it still uplifts people's day, right? Like you don't need, a language to do that because you're speaking with other types of language, the visual language.
And I remember last year when the Supreme Court decision about Roe v. Wade came down, I came to the shop and I was like, I want to make a poster. And you were like, go do it. And then all these people came in, we gave them out for free and used them as
Hmm.
protest posters and like, or had them in their windows on like very busy streets. And
Hmm.
it felt like a very tangible way to make art and have it have an impact literally immediately, which often in a design setting or a corporate setting, it doesn't feel like that. You're doing these long projects, and then very rarely do you get to feel the repercussions of it unless someone is like directly, saying like, "Oh, I saw this," or "I thought about this," or whatever.
Hmm.
And that obviously ties back into having owning the means of production, being able to like physically make things that you can sell to people, you can give to people that can inspire a community. Which
Hmm.
is why I think the space is so important to have people be able to come in and make work and like talk. We had a poetry reading last year, like all of these things that seem maybe disparate get tied together very clearly in a space like that, which I think is very powerful and also not very common anymore, which is upsetting.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's common because of the way I started the shop. I started it not from a business MFA or MBA business perspective, right? I started in a way that like I'm like, okay, here's the money I'm going to put up, and if I go broke in 2 years, at least I tried something,
Yeah.
right? But I want to make a big impact, and it's not about personally me, it's about the community, and that's what I want to do. But a lot of businesses these days are like, okay, we have investors, like how much return can we get on this? And that model of approaching, it's weird because like I'm going to say approaching business in a capitalistic perspective, I think is maybe not the best thing for what humans need. I
Yeah.
think humans need community, humans need interaction. I mean, we're sitting here doing this. I'm sure Zoom makes money somehow on this stuff,
Yeah.
but like
It's
we
interaction of a
it's
sort.
interaction, right? And there's degrees. I'm not saying like all businesses are bad, but I think a lot of businesses, you go down, I'm going to use a very local hyper specific thing. You go down like Hayes Street in Hayes Valley, and I lived in San Francisco from 2007 to 2022, and it's so I've seen that street change a lot. And actually my first apartment was hit on Hayes, and one of my last apartment was on the Hayes. And from like the shops that I see that have inhabited that street, it went from vintage shops that were owned by local people. I mean, my roommate had a beautiful florist shop on that street. To now, it seems like every cheap, uh, made on the internet, like buy this as seen on the TV, as seen on the internet shop is there. So you have Warby Parker, you have Away, you have Parachute. You just have like all these things that you're just like, they're not doing community, they're not doing poetry readings. They're owned not by local people, they're
Yeah.
owned by someone somewhere else, and there's 100 other Parachutes, like who gives a shit? And so like having a very specific, hyper specific local shop like that, and there's other ones in San Francisco,
Yeah.
and there's other ones in LA and all these other towns, and it's just dependent on like if we can help those survive over um, these other kind of these ever-laney shops that pop up, you know.
So we actually only have a couple minutes left. So I mean that's a very powerful place.
Really?
But
God damn it.
but I was hoping you would have a sort of short piece of advice for young artists like me and other people starting out, or maybe to your younger self about design and life and fighting the good fight.
Yeah. Oh man. You know, something I wish I knew. I can't give any advice because I don't think I'm a person who never really listened to that much advice. I think I'm a person who had to learn from experience. But I would say, you know, you can only push your I'm a person who kind of doesn't believe in fate. I just think how things kind of are going the way they're going to go. And you can make things happen if you push. But as I was younger, I was like, I'm determined to make this. But as I look back, seeing the opportunities presented to me, whether it be right place, right time, whether it be privilege, right, whether it be like hard work to get there, all of those are kind of gonna happen already. So like, yeah, try, put your best foot forward, but be okay if things don't work out. Friends, yeah, thing else, in terms of like good friends, and you know, love yourself as a human being, and always try to like distill yourself down to what you truly want in this life. And I don't mean like eat potato chips and watch TV. I mean like truly what makes you happy and what really fulfills you. Just do those things and don't worry about that money thing. And I'm not talking, I moved to San Francisco with $300 and my family doesn't have any money. Just just do what you truly love. To like search your soul, what you truly love, and do it, and everything else will work for you.
Okay, that's a pretty good lesson, other than the no potato chips. Because that might be
You
some
can
of
eat
the soul
potato
calling.
chips.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's a religion I'll buy into. But thank you. I think
I just think, yeah, I just think, I mean, I'm a person that thinks laziness might be a form of self hate in a way, but
yeah, I learned that last year as the intern.
it's
Um,
me.
but
Yeah.
we're gonna get kicked off here. So thank you for talking, and it's always a pleasure to learn from you, to talk to you, and to be inspired by everything that you have learned and distill it into things I'm learning. So thanks, and I hope I get to see you again soon.